So we start to get in the 1860s group of like-minded women getting together, forming organisations like the Women's Higher Education League, the Franchise League. Franchise means voting, of course. And we get the same names, Barbara Bodichon, Lydia Becker, who I'll mention in a minute. We get the same names appearing in all of these groups. Many of them are connected with the Liberal Party, but not all by any means. And they're only connected to provide the teas, really, because remember, they can hold no position in a political organisation at that time. So I want to talk then about the Pankhurst family. Now, the main centre of activity in the north of England was the Manchester area. I'll explain Liverpool's position was different. This was a much more, in political terms, conservative town than, say, Manchester was in the middle of the 19th century. And although it had a Liberal MP as well as two Conservatives, generally Liverpool was not considered in the 1860s to be what you would describe as a politically progressive community. But there are, of course, and there were later, many Liverpool women who were involved in the suffragette movement. The Pankhurst family were a well-off, upper-middle-class Manchester family, and a daughter was born, Emmeline Pankhurst. Let me give you her maiden name first, Emily Goulding, born in 1858. And it's significant that although she is listed as being born on the 15th of July 1858, in any conversation that she would have about this, she always said that she was born a day earlier, the 14th of July 1858, a significant date in history because of the French Revolution. So she was born, a mother Sophia, well-read, well-educated, modern-ish woman, as she could be, and her father, James Goulden, was a theatre owner and actor for a small theatre in Salford. The kind of books that Emmeline was being read to as a child at the age of 3, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, the great anti-slavery tract, which sold millions of copies in the 1850s. I remember how jealous Dickens was when Beecher Stowe was selling more copies of her book than he was of some of his. Anyway, it was a famous, still is, a famous work. At 9 years of age, she read Thomas Carlyle's History of the French Revolution. I only got to page 10, and she was reading that at the age of 9, allegedly. She was a very kind of highbrow sort of girl. At 14, she went to a meeting in Manchester of the Women's Franchise League, and she heard a woman called Lydia Becker speak. Becker was one of the founders of the advanced education movement for women. She was in favour of the vote. She was a scientist when women were not. And she made a catalogue of all English plants, which was a very valuable book at that time. But incidentally, she couldn't publish it under her name as a woman, even at that stage. So she was a scientist, a fine speaker, and Emmeline at the age of 14 heard her speak and was attracted to her speaking and interested in suffrage, that is the vote, from that time onwards. It's now 1872. She went with her mother to hear Becker. She was then sent to school in Paris. Now you'll hear in novels this idea of the finishing school, and literally what it meant was that a girl should be finished in regards to capabilities in the home, running a house, home economics, not so much cooking, but managing menus, managing supplies. They would normally have someone to cook for them. This idea of management of a house, and also what might be necessary in finding a man, a life partner. As simple as that. And if you watched Vanity Fair on ITV, Becky was one of the finest. She's one of my love heroines, Becky Sharp, in that particular book. She's a bad girl. Anyway, this idea of creating a finished article for the 19th century marriage market was the life path on which Emmeline was sent, even by a liberal progressive family with more modern political views. But still, they were still part of this system. There was, though, within the family, this idea of serving the public. And after she came back from Paris, Emmeline met a young man called Richard Pankhurst, who had resolved to be a bachelor because he always said that not being a bachelor would distract him from his life's work, which was the service of the people.